before we can really get into the bonding model, we need to talk about, well, what exactly is going on with a bond? What's happening here? So a chemical bond will form if it causes a lowering in the potential energy between these charged particles that compose atoms. You have protons and electrons in both atoms, and if the bond causes the energy to lower, it will happen. Got a complex set of interactions. We've got electrons repelling each other, nuclei repelling each other, but electrons and nuclei being attracted to each other. So if we get a net reduction in energy, a bond will form. There are different kinds of bonds. Ionic bonds are those that happen between metals and nonmetals. And this is the same way we divided nomenclature. We talked about ionic compounds having one set of naming rules and molecular compounds or covalent compounds having another set. So metals have low ionization energies. It's fairly easy to take electrons away from them. Nonmetals tend to have negative electron affinities, meaning if you give them an electron, they will release energy. And so what can very easily happen with metals and nonmetals is that the metal will transfer an electron to the nonmetal. As a result of this, one of these is a positive ion and one is a negative ion, and now they're like really attracted to each other. It's opposite charges attract. So in ionic bonds, we have a transfer of electrons. Electrons started with the metal, they get transferred to the nonmetal. And we're also going to talk about covalent bonds, which means sharing. So in a covalent bond, we've got the two nonmetals, and we're not going to have ions form because both of the nonmetals would prefer to gain electrons. So nobody's willing to transfer its electrons to the other nonmetal. So they can't agree about that, so then what do? Well, you share the electrons. So the electrons get shared. And that will be most stable if the shared electrons are located between the two nuclei rather than being shared off to a side. So potential energy gets lowered and we've got a covalent bond. So the electrons are shared between two nuclei. Metallic bonding happens between metals. We'll talk more about this later. Metals lose electrons easily, and so the simplest model for metallic bonding is called the electron C model, where essentially you have the valence electrons just being kind of loose in the metal, and like in a pool or an ocean, a sea of electrons, and they can move around. And like I said, we'll talk more about that one later.